Hey there, this is Ill Factor from beatacademy.com. Welcome back to the channel. And in this video, I want to share with you some music production tips and techniques while recreating the beat you can hear in Post Malone's One Right Now featuring The Weeknd. Let me start off by playing you the finished result. There's some really cool things going on throughout this beat, so be sure to stay tuned to this video as I show you how to recreate the drums, the basses, and some of the other sounds that you can hear in this track. Also, if you're serious about producing your own music and you're ready to take that next step forward and you're looking for professional guidance to help you do so, then I want to encourage you to visit beatacademy.com and take advantage of all the resources I have available for you there, as well as the mentorship opportunities where I can come alongside you and help you achieve your music career goals. So visit beatacademy.com for more information. All right, let's go ahead and start by creating the bass line. So for the bass line, I'm going to start by using Ableton Live's wavetable. Now you could follow along if you're not using Ableton Live with any 2 or more oscillator synth. Any stock synthesizer that you might have in your DAW will do just fine. Because when we hear the bass line that we can hear in the song, it's got this chorusy, almost like this rubbery, wide, chorusy type of tone to it. And immediately my mind goes to starting off with a sawtooth as our initial waveform. So oscillator 1, let's go ahead and choose our sawtooth. And on the waves table, we're going to do that right there. Let's go ahead and listen to our pattern. Now, there's a couple notes that are overlapping on one another. So the first thing is to set from polyphonic to monophonic, and that's going to stop that overlapping. Let's go ahead and turn oscillator 2 on and choose this as a sawtooth as well. And what's going to give us that nice widened effect is by detuning. So I'm actually going to detune it minus, and I'm going to go a whole semitone down. This is going to cause oscillator 2 to be an octave lower than oscillator 1. And that's going to give us a nice richer tone on the bottom, on the low end spectrum. All right, so let's go ahead now and head over to our envelope and assign our filter frequency to our envelope. And this is going to allow us to control the character of our filter. So now let's go ahead and click filter frequency and assign that to envelope 1. And let's go probably around 45. And if we need more, we can adjust it, or if we need less, we'll do the same. Bring your filter frequency down. That's cool. Now let's do a little bit of fine tuning to get it just where we want it. So I'll bring the filter frequency down, gives us a nice deeper, richer tone. And let's bring the resonance up a little bit. And I'm going to give a little bit of filter drive here as well. So I'm going to choose the MS2 and give a little bit of drive. Let's shape the body of the synth. So I'm going to go to the amp envelope. I'm going to bring the sustain down just a little bit. And now let's head over to the filter envelope, envelope 2, which is the one we assigned over here, envelope 2, to the filter frequency. And let's just adjust the decay a little bit and the release. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I want the filter to open up and I want it to kind of linger a little bit. So the release is the value that will do that. If we have a short release, it's going to be really quick with opening up that filter and coming back down. You see that? So give this a little bit of love here. Let's put that around 700 or so. So we have that nice tail end of the filter frequency. All right. Now, to give it that nice wide chorusy effect, we can go into our unison mode and hit classic and just dial up and down the amount. Now, if you're following along, but you're on Logic, Fruity Loops, or Pro Tools, or any other DAW, there is a plugin by Arturia that is a chorus effect, which is great. And we'll use this here as well. And this is giving you that Juno 106 chorus that is really famous, that I love from that synthesizer. So that can be a great option too. You can also get that sound by going into the unison mode and adjusting the amount of, just heading over to classics and adjusting the amount here. I'm going to turn the sub oscillator on, and that's going to beef up a little bit more of the low end as well. All right, next I'm just going to use a compressor to kind of just balance out the overall performance. So we'll head over to our dynamics folder, drag and drop a compressor on here, and let's just bring the threshold down a little bit. Not a lot of compression. We're just trying to control the notes so we're getting a good overall consistent dynamic performance. And I want more of the attack to come through, so I'll put a medium attack here. What I meant by the attack of the bass is what I want to come through. And then I'll just give about maybe 2 dB of gain. So this is more so for the overall, all the notes. I don't want, as the notes go higher in pitch or lower, they might resonate or jump out a little bit more in volume. So the compressor is going to be able to control that. That's what we're doing here. Now I actually want to bring some punch out of this bass. And so I'm thinking of using a transient designer. So I'm going to go over here and use the Excellent Audio's drum shaper. I'm going to use this for the purpose of actually just bringing out some more initial punch from the transient of this bass. And then bring a little bit of presence up here. All right, and then let's go ahead and EQ this. Might be a little too bright. And I'm not gonna touch the frequency and say, well, why don't you just lower the frequency? I'm gonna leave it right where it's at because it's actually shaping the overall tone of the synth. And so if I dial the frequency knob on the wavetable up or down, that's gonna change the character of that sound. So I'm gonna leave that alone. And if I wanted to warm it up or brighten it up, I'll do that with an EQ. And then let's go ahead and saturate this just a little bit with a saturator. And we'll bring up a little bit of drive here and then compensate by lowering the output a little. So I'm just gonna highlight these 4 plugins. We've got the compressor, the transient designer, EQ, and saturator. Take this off. All right, and I've got a little bit of reverb, room reverb here, a room reverb on auxiliary B, so I'll send a little bit of that. And now I have a drum rack loaded with some vintage drum machine samples, specifically coming from the SP12. If you're not familiar with that, it is a vintage drum machine really used throughout the 80s, and it's got that retro type of feel to it. And so it has a unique texture and tone to the drum samples and sounds. I've loaded a couple of those samples here. Got our kick and a tom, just those simple basic elements in there. So let's go ahead and look at the pattern that we have going on during the chorus. Now, a couple of things to keep note of. So what I want to do is have that open hi-hat sample shut off immediately when the kick sample is being heard. And the way we can do that is by utilizing choke numbers. Choking is basically the ability to stop one sound the minute another sound is heard. So I'm going over to the open hi-hat, and I'm going to make sure I go over here, the choke number, and choose 1. And so anything else with the choke number 1 will cancel this sound out. So that means let's go to their kick drum and also choose number 1 here. So now when I play the hi-hat, and the minute the kick is played, the hi-hat will close, giving it that effect that it's just immediately closing after the kick is being heard. Now what I want to do is add a little bit more presence to this snare drum. Just soloing the snare drum here. But not presence in the EQ sense, presence like a little bit more depth and dimension. And a great way to do that is by utilizing gated reverb, especially to these type of retro vintage type of drums. So For that, let's go ahead and use a reverb, then a gate plugin. Let me show you what I mean. Audio effects, let's head over to our stock reverb. Just drag and drop that there. And then let's go to our dynamics folder and choose a gate. Now what we need to do is lower the threshold. And what's cool about this, you can visually see what's happening. We have the initial transient or the initial snare sample, and then that light gray area is the actual tail of the reverb. So we want it to be heard, so let's crank up the hold and release. Without the gate, we have the snare just running straight through the reverb. So we want to just shut that tail off a little bit. That's where the gate comes in. And so without the gated reverb, you lose that dimension, that space. Putting these two back on. All right, now let's put that back. And just dial in the release of the gate to your personal preference. Now with the hi-hat, I want to sidechain the hi-hat, but not necessarily to the kick drum like I usually do to create some pulse. This I'm actually using as a creative rhythmic tool. So what I mean by that is I'm going to have the hi-hat duck out of the way every time the gated snare plays. And this is going to create the illusion that the hi-hat is actually stopping when the snare plays. Now I know you might be thinking, why not just go into the pattern and every time the snare plays, take out the hi-hats? This is going to give a different feel. And that's why these tools and these small little, doing these kind of things adds a big difference, or the, small compounded nuances like this go a long way. So here's the hi-hat. I'm going to enable my compressor here and it's set to sidechain. I'm going into the drum rack and I am choosing my snare drum, post mixer. So that's after the gated reverb, okay? So here's what's happening. So now let's go ahead and solo the snare with it. So the hi-hat is just ducking slightly, and I'm exaggerating the release a little bit here, and the threshold is really down, but the hi-hat is just kind of going down in volume. It's not disappearing all the way, it's just going down in volume and then coming right back. That's a cool effect. And now what we have here for these claps, let's just place a reverb directly on top of them to add some more of that depth and dimension here. This is without it. This is with it. Okay. And let's also go in here to the toms, and I'm just going to filter them out here. The tom, so it's just not as bright. There you go. And now once I have those drums put together, let me go ahead and beef up the tone a little bit. So giving it a lot of texture and grit is going to come from saturation. And in this case, I actually want to use an overdrive plugin. So I'm going to go to my drive folder and use overdrive. Now, by default, the overdrive comes, it has a filter in there. So anything inside this area is what it's processing through the distortion. So I'm going to expand this so it gets everything. And bring the dynamic sound and the dry and wet down a little bit. See, with the filter of the overdrive down, you're going to thin out the drums because you're losing the low end and the shimmer of the high end there. So we're going to expand this and cover everybody. All right, now let's just give a little bit of compression. We're going to go to our glue compressor and dial in a pretty, not crazy slow attack and a quick release. The slower the attack, the more punch I'm initially going to get. The quicker the release, the faster the compressor lets go of what it's compressing. I'm just trying to balance out the relationship between that, the kick snare and the hi-hat. Now I want to warm this up a little bit, something that you would normally get when you use like tape saturation, and it warms up the drive. And so in this case, I'm going to go to the auto filter, and I'm going to place this right after the overdrive. And I'm going to use this to actually shave some of that high end off. And I'm going to use the filter drive here to give it some crunch. Put the soft clip on. And then I'll use an EQ8 after the compressor to maybe just knock out any other frequencies I don't really. Now let's add a shaker, and the shaker is going to be cool. And what I want to do with the shaker is maybe add some auto panning so we've got some movement left and right. But having a shaker is going to bring some of that brightness back that we're missing, that we just kind of warmed up with these drums. And it also just kind of helps fill in the gap. So if you ever feel like, these drums, they sound stiff, there's something kind of missing in between the hits and stuff like that, let's add a shaker to help do that. So I'm going to go to a folder here. I have a couple shaker loops, maybe just like an egg shaker. Yeah, this will be fine. Put it in there, and let's play it along with the drums. As I mentioned, I'll go to the audio effects folder here, and I'm going to go to the auto pan, drag and drop that right onto that. So it's just moving a little bit. Now in the actual shaker file, let's go ahead and hit Command A to highlight the whole region of audio, and then quantizing that. So I'm hitting Command U to quantize, that's my hotkey, and this is just going to snap all of the shaker transients to the nearest grid. So my quantize settings are set to every 16th note, 41%. And then right here in transients where we're preserving, we're just going to play it once forward. Now play that with the drums. All right, now let's add our second bass layer, one that we can hear that's accenting the chord progression throughout the chorus. And listening to it, it's got this really resonant peak to it. It's like, meow, right? It's got that in it. That probably sounded like a giraffe falling down. But yeah, and so when I'm hearing that, my brain's thinking, okay, if it's resonating or it's got that sweep type of feel, I definitely want more resonance than cutoff. So with that in mind, I'm going to head over back to the wavetable, right? And I'm going to start off with the sawtooth again because it does have buzz. It's got some brightness to it. It's not a sine or a triangle where it's really dull and low. The sawtooth is kind of, that's kind of where we want to start with. So let's turn oscillator 1 on and set oscillator 2 on and put oscillator 2 an octave lower here. So let me just solo this. All right, so that's playing the notes. Now we got to cause that sweep action to happen. So let's bring the frequency down and let's bring the resonance up. But now what we need to do is cause the envelope to open that filter up so that it goes all the way over here and then sweeps down automatically. That's what I'm trying to do. So over here to the matrix, and then we hit the filter frequency, and we map that to envelope 2, right around there. And now, so we see how it's going up. There's that. That might be a little too much there. So we're going to head over to the envelope 2, and now we're going to shape the actual response of the filter frequency. So let's start by increasing the decay time. And maybe bringing the sustain down a little bit. And the release. The release is going to be a big. Maybe a little bit more here. All right, so let's change our filter drive. All right, let's implement a filter drive here and give it a little bit of a little bit more resonance. And I'll go to oscillator 2 and detune this slightly. And now let's go into the amp envelope, and we're shaping the body here as well. Long decay. I'm going to set this from polyphonic to monophonic. All right, now giving that depth, that wideness that we hear, let's go ahead and use the Juno plugin that I alluded to earlier. So I'm going to go here and go to my plugins and June 6 from Arturia. Now, if I wanted this to be more drastic, we can go ahead and open up the filter frequency. Then I just want to increase the resonance just a little bit more so it gets a bit more drastic, and head back into the amp envelope and just kind of mess around with the release. And now we'll send some of that over to the reverb. Actually, let's just send a lot of it. See what that sounds like? All right, before moving on, I'm just gonna grab the shaker and the drum rack and group them together. We'll call this drum bus. And the reason for that is I just wanna give a little bit more warmth to that. So let's go over to our saturation plugin here, just a saturator, bring that on there and just give a touch there, just a little bit to warm that up. Now at this point, there's this really cool, seems like a drone, or it could just be Post Malone or somebody just singing the background vocal. It's got a pulse to it. And I thought a clever way of doing this is actually just sampling myself singing one word and then creating a endless loop in the simpler and then adding some texture to it and the pulse. So let me walk you through that. So here's an audio track that I have, and this is me just singing one note. It's gorgeous. It's beautiful. It's the worst thing I've ever heard. All right, so we've got that one note. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a MIDI track. Command-Shift-T, and then go to our instruments, and let's use our, well, I can actually just drag that sample into that empty MIDI track, and a simpler is going to load. So now I can trigger this track with my MIDI controller. Right now it's set to chromatic mode. But what we want to do is have this loop. So let's enable the loop and let's choose our starting position, maybe somewhere around here. So we don't have that scoop that's happening right here at the beginning. And then what we're going to do is right here, these are the loop, the length and where it's looping from. So we can go ahead and choose the length right here or the starting position of that loop. So we're going to start here, and we're going to change the position of the loop. So where the blue highlight starts is where the loop will start. And I'm going to go ahead and bring the length down, and we're just going to find a sweet spot for this to kind of loop over and over. That's cool. Let's add some fade so we don't have any popping and it seems a bit more seamless. And then let's go ahead and add a reverb. So I'm going to go over here to audio effects. Let's add just a stock reverb directly on that. That's going to give us our space. A little decay time. And then I'll use a plugin called LFO Tool. And this is going to allow us to get that pulse action going without having a side chain once we hit play. So let me turn this one off. And the cool thing is, now that we've created this constant loop, I can go ahead and map and actually play the notes that I'm hearing in the background. So now I'm just going to go ahead and play the actual pattern here. Let's see what that sounds like now with everybody all together. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. And as my gift to you for watching this, I'd love to send you a sample pack filled with loops, construction kits, one-shots that you can use in your projects. It's 100% royalty-free. And as well as this Ableton Live set, if you're using Ableton, you can follow along and rewatch this video and kind of go step by step. And for those who aren't following along with Ableton Live, whether it's on Logic, Pro Tools, I want to go ahead and share with you the stems as well. And that can be accessed by following and the link below in the description box or visiting beatacademy.com/pack. Also, if you're serious about wanting to produce your music or you've been producing music for a while and you're looking for professional guidance to help you take your next step, then I want to encourage you to head over to beatacademy.com and take advantage of all the resources that I have available for you there, as well as the mentorship opportunities. So many of my members have seen such tremendous growth and change, not only with their music, but being able to achieve the goals that they wanted to with their music career. So if this is you, then definitely look into visiting beatacademy.com for more information. Be sure to like and subscribe so you can stay up to date with upcoming videos, and I'll see you next time.